Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why gaining muscle and getting big really isn't as complicated as people have made it out to be. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on scaling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, everyone pretends like they have all these little magic secrets to gaining muscle, and it's usually from this bodybuilder or that bodybuilder, which you guys know I'm not a fan of that, of bodybuilding in general. But I do appreciate the fact that a lot of people want to get big. They want to get big. They want to gain muscle, or at least more muscle than they have now. And everyone pretends that they have all these magic secrets. And let's just be honest here. You want to know what the magic secrets are to bodybuilders? Genetics and shitloads of drugs. Okay, that's their magic secret. That's their magic secret. Most of these guys wouldn't be able to train their way out of a wet paper bag. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but most bodybuilders that you meet don't really have a good knowledge of even basic human physiology. They really don't. Now, I know some who are brilliant at it. I know some who are absolute experts at it. But by and large, the majority are not. And they try to come up with all these complicated secrets to keep you buying products, to keep you buying programs and everything else. And let's be realistic here. There are really only three basic factors to gaining muscle mass. And if you extrapolate that, if there's only three basic factors involved, then those factors are what is required to get about as big as you can possibly get. But keep in mind that whole bodybuilder look you're thinking of is generally coming from combinations of drugs and genetics. And then furthermore, we're talking about refining certain weak points. And that's totally different than getting big. You can get pretty big and pretty jacked without refining every little weak point. In fact, you shouldn't even be worried about that anyways. Even guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say, what did he write in his book? You can't chisel a pebble. So even guys like that understood that you don't need this refinement work till you have gotten big. You get big and then worry about refinement. Otherwise, you're just going to spin your wheels. All right, what are those three factors? Workload, right? Getting the work done, stimulating muscle growth. Food, getting adequate nutrition to build the muscle growth, fuel the training, fuel the recovery. And 3, rest and recovery. That's really it, guys. That's all there is to it. That is the magic secret. So when you look at it from that perspective, it really isn't even that complicated on the growth end. It's not that complicated. When we start looking at all the research on muscle growth, what are we finding more and more? Rep range doesn't matter that much. In other words, there are not hypertrophy reps. There's no hypertrophy rep range. It's how much workload can you subject the muscle to. We've got studies showing that maximal muscle growth can be achieved with 3 rep sets. It can be achieved with 10 rep sets. And then we've got even data out there for even more extreme rep ranges beyond that, still stimulating some muscle growth or some anabolic metabolites. So really, it's just a matter of organizing all of that. And when I say by that they can all produce maximum muscle growth, when we say, oh, there's benefits to high reps, medium reps, low reps, yeah, there are benefits, but guaranteeing more muscle growth isn't one of them. Okay, people need to understand that. I'm all for periodization. I'm all for training programming. But you need to understand you don't have to be particularly complex with that if you're just trying to get as big as you possibly can. It's not actually necessary to fully address all those performance elements, because a lot of those rep ranges have to do with performance elements, periodizing different phases of training to help you push past plateaus. But seriously, when you're talking about periodizing everything to do that, you're talking about very small improvements like over the long term. And in other words, you're going to have stalls and stuff. If you stick with the same basic rep range and only adjust volume and frequency a little bit and don't change much else, you're going to hit different stalls in your training through the year. And when you periodize, you might push past those stalls a little bit quicker. It might give you, out of your 52-week year, very seriously periodized training programming might shave 2 or 3 weeks off of your stalls throughout the year. In other words, you're talking about a few percentages difference in how much muscle you're going to gain. It's not going to be world changing. It's not like you're going to gain an extra 5 pounds of muscle or something as a result of more complex programming. I'm not saying there aren't benefits, because there are. And I mean, I have some periodized programs and things I put out, but it isn't going to give you like double the gains from doing this stuff. It really isn't, guys. It's all about workload. It's all about workload. So you can choose to do whatever rep range you want as long as you're getting a sufficient amount of work done. You're training all the muscles thoroughly. They're getting enough workload to grow. The training end is covered, guys. It's covered. Now, what do we also know? Rep range doesn't matter. That workload is what matters for growth. What else do we know? Big compound movements put more muscle on you than small exercises. Now, when I say that, am I telling you should never do curls? No. Am I saying, oh no, you shouldn't ever train your rear delts because those are small muscles you shouldn't worry about? I'm not saying that at all. Look, if you want to do some concentration curls, actually I'd recommend you do big, heavy curls, where you can turn it into a multi-joint exercise, like with a barbell. I might recommend face pulls or rear delt rows, or just doing more rows in general for your rear delts instead of a reverse peg deck. Mainly just because it's about exercise efficiency. But there's no real evidence that isolating a muscle makes it grow faster than a compound movement. In other words, we don't even have evidence yet showing that a curl produces more muscle growth than a lat pull down does. And a lat pull down is probably not the most ideal back and bicep exercise anyway. I think pull-ups, chin-ups, rows, I think those things work a hell of a lot better. But the point is, big exercises put more muscle on you. Everything else is really a secondary concern. Put your focus on the big exercises. Now, I didn't even name specific ones because you know what? You don't have to do the specific versions I prefer. You can have your own variations. But I mean, what do I mean by big exercises? I mean, it's going to throw samples out. If you get as strong as you possibly can, and by strong, keep in mind, I'm not talking about necessarily hitting your 1 rep max in a powerlifting meet. I'm talking about maximizing your 5 rep strength, your 8 rep strength, right? You get as strong as possible on the squat, bench, deadlift, the standing press, weighted pull-ups, barbell rows, or weighted chin-ups, some rows, whatever. You're going to be pretty big. You're going to be pretty big in terms of your overall potential. Now, am I saying that's the only things you would ever need? No. Am I saying not to ever change anything up? Nope, didn't say that either. But if you put a heavy focus on those things and you get a lot of workload in because you can handle heavy weight, when you get to the ability on those lifts to where you build your strength and work capacity to where you can handle pretty heavy weights for a fair amount of volume, you're going to get pretty big. You're going to start reaching your potential, right? It makes it a hell of a lot easier. So it's about that. It's about just putting in work. And hell, if you want to throw some curls in at the end of the day, go ahead and throw in some curls. But you need to understand those curls are not going to get you jacked. They're not even going to be the basis of your bicep development. Your chin-ups and your rows and stuff are going to add more. And you want to throw on a finishing touch because you want to do some curls, by all means. But understand that it's just polishing a little bit. It's a little bit of a finishing touch. It's just finishing that muscle off if you want to. It's not that critical. It may not make or break you. And it sure as hell not. You're not going to get big by doing cable curls, right? You're not. Reality. Now, food's the same thing. People want to stay ripped year round. You know what? I can understand that, but here's what we're talking about. We're talking about sacrifices. They're talking about sometimes to get what you want in life, you have to do something you don't want to do. I don't understand why this is such a hard concept for a lot of people. We know that bulking, and even bulking means gaining some body fat, generally puts a hell of a lot more muscle on you. And if you bulk carefully and you don't become a really fat slob, you don't lose a lot of muscle when you trim the fat off later. But if you spend a solid year bulking and then 6 months cutting, trimming down, you're going to be a hell of a lot bigger in a year and a half than you would be if you tried to just stay at 10 or 11% body fat and just slowly gain muscle, right? You try to do that, and even at the 2-year mark, you're probably not going to be as big as you could have been at the 1.5-year mark. You're probably still going to be a hair behind. I'm not saying lean gains aren't possible. There are experts who say lean gains are not possible, by the way. I'm not a person who's saying that, but there are people with way more credentials than me, way more education, who have a lot of experience who say that lean gains are virtually impossible for non-novice lifters and people not on drugs. All right, there are guys out there with PhDs who say it is virtually impossible. I don't agree with them, but just understand that there are people there who believe that it is almost impossible to achieve, and that it's borderline a waste of time because it's so difficult to achieve from a practical perspective. So you've got to look at it that way. Maybe you want to be able to buy a Corvette. Okay, let's put that on par with getting the physique that you want, the size and the muscle that you want is a really high goal. Just like for most people, getting a Corvette's a pretty difficult goal to achieve, right? Do you think you're probably going to have to do some things that you don't particularly enjoy to get a Corvette? In other words, do you think you're going to make enough money playing on your Xbox, jerking off and smoking weed all day? Because that's probably might be what you want to do. That might be for a lot of people out there their ideal life. Man, if I could just jerk off and smoke weed and watch and play on my Xbox all day, I'd be really happy. Hey, maybe that will make you happy. But if that's your lifestyle and you're not independently wealthy, do you think you're going to be able to buy a Corvette doing that? No, you might have to go work a job. You might have to work a job that you hate. You might have to deal with people you can't stand to get what you want. In other words, to get the things that you want, sometimes you have to do things that are uncomfortable. You might have to do things that you're not going to enjoy in the short term. Well, for guys who want to stay ripped, who say, but I don't want to gain fat. Well, you can shit in one hand and want in the other and see which one fills up faster. If you want to get big and reach anywhere near your maximum size potential, you're probably going to need to bulk. You're probably going to have to at some point. You might have to do it several times. You might have to do it for 3 years. You might have to do it for 5 years. But the point is, if you're not willing to do the things that you don't want to do, for at least for a little while, at least in the short term, then don't complain that you don't get what you want. In other words, don't complain that you don't have a Corvette if your life dream was to have a Corvette, but you don't want to get off the Xbox or quit smoking weed all day. You see what I mean? It's the same concept. Yeah, you might have to go do something uncomfortable. In the case of getting big, you might have to actually gain some body fat, and you don't want that. You wanted that lean. You wanted that finished look. You didn't want to deal with the 3 or 5 year process to get to that finished look. You didn't want to deal with anything in between. You just want to be there. Well, there are drugs that are shortcuts to that, but I'm going to recommend you not do that because that carries its own problems, right? You're going to have your own set of problems from all that, whether it's legal, health-wise, mood, everything else. It can destroy your relationships because of the mood changes. Those things you better think about. There are shortcuts, but they're not always pleasant, and there's a price to be paid anyways. And then rest, guys. It's all about rest and sleep. If you refuse to get 8 hours of sleep every night, you refuse to get adequate rest and learn to relax and unwind, then again, don't complain when you don't get big. You got to find a way to manage all of that. You got to find ways to manage your fatigue. You have to find ways to rest and recover. It's critical. That's the final important element. And guys, it really is that simple though. But you know what? It's really hard to market that, isn't it? It really is hard to market that. But it's the truth. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.